The Buccaneers have a leg up on the rest of the NFC South thanks to one player. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credential member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you at least 3 days a week for the month of June, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Finally, closing out all of these mailbag questions to talk about the defense, some upcoming free agents, and what Brian Baldinger had to say about his visit to Tampa. We're going to kick this one off from Insider Dave, who asked, can you rank the NFC South quarterbacks and how wide of a gap is there between Baker and the rest? That's a good question, and I love the assumption that Baker is leaps and bounds ahead of the rest of the pack because, well, I mean, he is. So if we're going to go through and rank the NFC South quarterbacks from top to bottom, it's going to go Baker Mayfield, Bryce Young at 2, Michael Penix at 3, and then we're all kind of assuming it's Taylor Shuck for New Orleans, but it doesn't matter if it's Shuck or Rattler. They are coming in 4th. But how big is the gap between Baker and the rest? Well, the gap between Baker and whoever starts in New Orleans is similar to the gap between Michael Jordan and Brian Scalabrine. I mean, they're in the league, and that's cool. Both of those quarterbacks are way better than any of us ever were at football, but that gap is huge. It's a Grand Canyon level separation between Baker and whoever the quarterback is in New Orleans. Then you take a look at Michael Penix, who I am still not sold on. This was a guy who last year, as a starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons, was put onto the field with the team still in the hunt for the playoffs. He completed fewer than 60% of his passes. He had 775 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He was sacked 4 times. Now, he is getting a full offseason to prep as the starter, but is there any way that in his mind he doesn't think that starting 1-4 or 0-3 or something to that effect isn't going to prevent him from being benched as long as Kirk Cousins is still on the team? Is there any way at all that he thinks he can go out there and throw 2 or 3 interceptions and then not get the hook for Cousins if there's still a way that they can win that game? This is going to be the problem for the Falcons. As long as both of those players are on the roster, there is no cemented job security there, and whoever the starter is will constantly be looking over their shoulder to see whether or not the other guy is coming in after a bad play, after a bad decision, any of those types of things. There's going to be hesitation, trepidation, a sense of playing scared that's going to seep into their game, and that is a problem. You are not going to play your best when you're playing scared, whether that's scared to lose your job, scared to make a mistake, whatever the case may be. And that's where Penix is right now. Yes, the Falcons invested a top 10 pick on him when they didn't need to. And yes, they say he's the future. But if there's a chance to make the playoffs or to save a game, do you really think that they won't make the switch like they did last year? So now that leaves a 2-man race for the top spot in the division with Baker and Young, who are both unquestioned starters and leaders of their team, at least right now. Young still has a ways to go to catch Baker, but he looked good down the stretch last season. So last year, he starts the first 2 weeks. He throws 3 interceptions and no touchdowns, only 245 passing yards. He threw for 84 yards on 18 completions in week 2. absolutely horrendous. He gets pulled for Andy Dalton, so he doesn't play in weeks 3 or 4. He comes in against the Bears in week 5 and throws 7 passes. He completed 4 for 58 yards in a losing effort. He doesn't play in week 6. Week 7, he throws 2 passes. He completes both for -4 yards, which is, borderline impressive. But then he starts the rest of the way. The Panthers lose to Denver, but 224 yards, 2-2. All right, cool. Then the next week, 171, 1-1. All right, not terrible, but then things start clicking a little. 126, yardage isn't great, but 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Then 263, 1-0. 298, 1-0. 191, 1-1. 219, 1-2. That was a little bit of a slide, but then right back, 158, 2-0. 203, 2-0. 251, 3-0. After taking back over as the starter in week 8, the Panthers went 4-6, while Young had 15 touchdowns and just 6 interceptions compared to the 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions he had in his first 2 starts of the season. I think he and Canales really started to figure some things out together throughout that stretch and throughout the season, but then they add more weapons for him. They bring in Rico Dowdle. They draft Ted McMillan and Jimmy Horn Jr. to add to Xavier Legette and Adam Thielen. There's more help on the defensive side of the ball this year. They signed 8 defensive players in free agency. They drafted 4 more. That's why I keep saying that the Panthers are a team to watch this year that can surprise people. But all that said, Young still needs to put together a full, solid season before he can even be in the same conversation as Baker Mayfield. Back-to-back postseason appearances, back-to-back career years in passing yards and touchdowns, back-to-back career years in completion percentage. Coming off of a career best season in success percentage, passer rating, QBR, back-to-back Pro Bowls. He got votes last year for MVP and Offensive Player of the Year. This guy had 29 wins in 59 games in Cleveland. He's at 19, having just played 34 games in Tampa, and he was in Cleveland for 4 years. He's entering his 3rd year with the Bucs and is probably going to pass that win total that he had with the Browns. He is 23 touchdowns away from the amount that he had in Cleveland. He is playing the best ball he has ever played in his life, and the Bucs go out and get him more weapons. They went out and got him 2 more receivers to utilize. They promoted Josh Grizzard as offensive coordinator instead of an outside hire in order to keep Baker in the same offense where he has absolutely been cooking. And I think something else that separates Baker from the rest of the NFC South quarterbacks is that he is unflappable. He knows this is his team. He knows he's the short-term and long-term guy for Tampa. Those other guys could all be benched at a moment's notice and no one would bat an eye. Bryce Young, he was the number 1 pick in the draft 2 years ago. Canales benched him after 2 games last season. So while I say he is the unquestioned starter right now, don't think that there's not a possibility that Canales won't turn right around and bench him again if Young starts the season like he did last year. If he goes out and loses the first 2 games while throwing no touchdowns and multiple interceptions each week, he's going to be in danger of losing his job again. Baker isn't getting benched for Trask at any point. Unless he throws 5 interceptions in a game and the Bucs are down by 30, Baker's not coming off the field. He is locked and loaded, and you can see him playing with that confidence. You saw it in 2023, even though that was kind of a prove-it year. Once he was named their guy, he absolutely let loose. Then he gets his extension. He gets even better. The mental aspect of the game is so easily overlooked, but it's very, very real. These are regular human beings with the same fears as the rest of us. And when they find themselves in a situation where their coach and their GM and their team believe in them, they get better. It's probably the same for you at your job. You get some recognition, you get a raise, you get a bonus, you get a promotion. All of a sudden, you elevate your game because you know they believe in you and they appreciate what you are doing. Baker wasn't appreciated in Cleveland or in Carolina. And while McVay loved him, he knew that he didn't have a future in Los Angeles. All of that adds up to that unquantifiable quality that has Baker so far ahead of the rest of the quarterbacks in this division. That's what gives the Bucs such a massive head start against the rest of the teams in that division. They just keep putting more and more pieces around him because they know he's their centerpiece. And Baker knows he's their centerpiece, and it makes the rest of the team that much better, that much more confident that they can compete. They didn't have that swagger and that confidence with Jameis there. They got it when Brady showed up, and they haven't lost it since. Another comparison with the defending Super Bowl champions, that is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, for me, it's the youth sports, but it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, all your investments, all your spending, all in one place. So you stop managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Ghost Hunter Gal wrote in and said, considering Clancy, Diaby, Reddick, and Vea, considering Cansey, Diaby, Reddick, and Vea are our front line, shouldn't we be rated with the Eagles as far as fierce? That's a great question, and I see where you're going with this, but I'm going to say no, and here's why. Until the Bucs defense proves that they can be a dominant unit, they do not belong in the same conversation as the Eagles. They just don't. I want them to be. I think they have the pieces to be, but they have to prove it. That's why those offseason additions are so important. Hassan Reddick, Benjamin Morrison, Jacob Parrish, Anthony Walker, David Walker, Elijah Roberts. Those additions are so vital to getting this defense back to where it needs to be and getting it back to where Todd Bowles is in his bag. You look at the Eagles, and I know you just mentioned some of the front guys, but look at the Eagles defense from front to back. They're loaded. They are absolutely loaded. They have playmakers and Pro Bowl caliber players at every position. The Eagles defense is as loaded as the Bucs offense, which is going to make that chess match in week 4 so interesting. But they don't have a weakness. The Bucs had weaknesses all over the field on defense last year. Yeah, a lot of that was due to injury, but people are still concerned about linebacker. They are putting a lot of chips in the rookie basket with Morrison, Parrish, Walker, and Roberts. You need Diaby to step up. You need Antoine to bounce back. You need Hall to be a heck of a lot more consistent along that defensive line. So while they have playmakers and they have talent on the defensive side, I cannot say that they are as fierce or as intimidating as the Eagles because they haven't shown that they are. I got to see it. I need them to start in week 1, right out of the gate, terrorizing Michael Penix in the Falcons. I need multiple sacks and takeaways in that game. Then I need to see it again the next week in primetime against the Houston Texans. They need to make CJ Stroud's life absolute hell. Houston has weapons all over the place too. I need to see that secondary step up in a big way to shut down Tank Dell and Nico Collins and Christian Kirk and Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll. I need those linebackers to step up against Joe Mixon. If they do that, we can revisit this conversation, but I cannot bring myself to speculate that they are going to be on Philadelphia's level defensively. Not yet. Insider Scotty says there are 3 players that are up for free agency in 2026, not counting Mike. Luke, Rashad, and Cade Otton. Who do you keep and who do you let go? I am getting rid of Otton. His stats, blocking, and drop counts don't cut it. He was 12th in the league in drops with just over 80 targets. That's bad. White, I think it's up to him. Luke, no brainer. What say you? Culp is ready to take over for Payne, and Payne is ready to start. He is so much better than Cade. Film, don't lie. Cade is one of the worst blocking tight ends in the league. Good man, but I'd send him on his way. Scotty, thank you for the question. You and I have kind of talked about this before, but we have very strong disagreement on Cade Otton, and that's perfectly fine. You're entitled to your opinion. I'm entitled to mine. But look, I know Cade isn't the best blocker at tight end, but according to PFF, he was 44th last season with a score of 64.1. Devin Culp was 5th with a grade of 79.6, but he only had 41 snaps. Cade had 899. So there's a little bit more room there for Cade to make more mistakes than Devin Culp. But to be fair, Kokeeft was 56th with a grade of 60.9. He is top 5 in run blocking among tight ends, but Durham was 53rd with a grade of 61.4. So, according to PFF, and again, it's not the end all be all, but it is a barometer where everybody is graded along the same lines. So it's even. They're saying that Cade Otton is actually the second best blocking tight end on this team overall. Now, Durham and Culp need more opportunities. Absolutely. Cade taking over 90% of the snaps is not a long-term story of success, but he is the best pass-catching tight end on the team. He had over a 51% success rate. That is above the league average there. 31 of his 59 receptions resulted in a first down. He was clutch, especially when Mike and Chris went down. And I'm not saying that Cade is destined to be an all-pro or a Pro Bowler, but he's certainly reliable enough, and he has the trust of Baker when it comes to those money downs. He's going to get plenty of open looks this year with all the other receiving threats that the Bucs have all over the field. He's going to have more mismatches and more opportunities there. To me, the answer is Rashad as the one that I'm letting go. He's already got 1 foot out the door already. You bring back Luke. That's a no-brainer. Like you said, you keep that continuity along the offensive line. But yeah, you bring back Cade Otton. Sure, you can look to upgrade there, but I think that the 4 that they have on the roster are perfectly fine. I would just like to see a little bit more of a rotation. I want to see them stop overusing Cade, or he's going to start wearing down. At the same time, Durham and Culp have earned more opportunities there, so let's get them worked into the offense a little bit more. And this also does answer a question from one of the other insiders who asked how the Bucs replace Rachaad White next year. The draft. You don't spend money on free agent running backs. Just draft one on the second day, maybe early third day, like you did with Bucky. You compliment Bucky and you just keep it moving. Insider Reggie says, what DBs do you think will hit the field barring injuries? Todd may make packages where both will, but in non-special packages, who takes the field? Reggie, thanks for the question. I'm guessing you're referring to the rookies, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about all the corners and how I see this thing kind of playing out. So I think week 1, your most likely lineup is going to be Dean and McCollum on the outside, Parrish at nickel, and then you have Antoine and Tyke as your safeties. I think Parrish ends up being the first of the rookie corners to start because of the position that he plays. They have Izien, who has been great, but I think he's more valuable to the Bucs defense and to Todd Bowles right now as a versatile weapon rather than stuffing him in at the starting nickel. You can bring him in to play corner. You can bring him in to play safety. You can bring him in as just an extra defensive back that can roam wherever, where you're bringing different blitz looks and however Todd wants to approach that. But, that's why they drafted Parrish. And he has a much more clear path to the starting job in week 1 than Morrison does. That doesn't mean that Morrison isn't going to be fighting for the job. I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit, but there will be times that Morrison is on the field with Dean and McCollum in special packages based on how the offense lines up. But I would say that those two guys have their starting jobs, those two being Jamel and Zion, they have their starting jobs locked up until further notice. However, training camp is going to be an absolute dogfight in the secondary. You have Morrison coming in to compete with McCollum and Dean for either of their jobs. You have Izien and Parrish fighting it out for nickel. You have Tyke as the safety, but that's not carved in stone yet. Bowles could change his mind and move Izien back there. You have Merriweather and Wisdom that are going to battle at safety. You have Shiloh Sanders in the building, who is going to want a shot at a roster spot. Josh Hayes, Tyreek Thunderbird, Kendall Vildor, Bryce Hall. All of these guys are battling it out for a limited number of roster spots. This is going to be the top training camp position battle on the team. And I think I've mentioned it before that I could absolutely see Morrison taking over as a starting corner within the first 6 weeks of the season. Remember, Bulls defense is incredibly complex, and it is most difficult on the corners and safeties to understand. You saw the learning curve for Zion McCollum and how long it took for him to really grasp his responsibilities and assignments. There's nothing that says it won't be the same for Morrison and Parrish, but ultimately, I think the talent of Morrison will win out over one of the other two guys. Most likely, it's going to be Jamel Dean. And I like Jamel. I do. He's a great dude, but he's inconsistent and often injured. One of those two things is going to be the crack in the door that Morrison needs to get onto the field. And once he gets there, he's not giving up that spot. That's it. It's game over. Really, I would love for him to be the guy to cover Marvin Harrison Jr. this season when the Bucs play the Cardinals in the Ring of Honor game. Shut him down. Absolutely shut him down when Notre Dame and Ohio State faced each other in 2023. I would love to see that matchup again. But beside the fact that I've been so high on Morrison for so long, what gives me the belief that he's going to fight tooth and nail all training camp long? Well, Brian Baldinger talked about him following his visit to Bucs OTAs. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, and Brian Baldinger was on his podcast talking about the Buccaneers. He mentioned that he was at OTAs this week, and he brought up a lot of different things, but since I just finished talking about it, I want to start with his comments on Benjamin Morrison. So Baldinger said that these guys were on the field for nearly 3 hours in over 90-degree Florida heat. He said there were guys dragging, there were guys huffing and puffing, and then there was Benjamin Morrison with a big smile on his face. And Baldy said that from his experience, when players get football taken away from them because of injury, they become more appreciative of the game, and they're just happy to be out there. And that's exactly what Morrison said to him. Morrison told Baldy that he didn't care how long they were out there or how hot it was. He was just happy to be on a football field again. And that right there is a perfect example of why I think Morrison is such a huge threat to Jamel Dean for the starting corner job. It goes beyond talent. Just like what I talked about with Baker, it goes into the mental side of the game. No one is more thankful for this upcoming football season than Benjamin Morrison. His goal at Notre Dame was to become a starter as a freshman. He did it. Then he became a captain, which was his next goal. He accomplished both of those things, but then had his captain season taken away from him. He missed the college football playoffs. He missed playing in a national championship. That entire season was ripped out from under him. He missed out on being a first-round pick. He was a consensus top 20, potentially top 15 pick, and that was ripped out from under him. He told us in Indianapolis at the Combine, he didn't fully understand how much he loved and how important the game of football was until he lost it. Go back to that video, Morrison getting the call from Jason Light and Todd Bowles, and the flood of emotions. That's not going away. It's going to manifest somewhere else, and that somewhere else is going to be on the field in training camp. Do you think a player that lost his last year of college ball, his goal of being a captain for a team that lost those playoffs, that lost that national championship, couldn't be out there to help his teammates? You think he's going to be complacent to sit on the sideline behind someone else on a depth chart? Absolutely not. He is going to fight nonstop starting next week at mandatory minicamp to earn his spot in the starting lineup. That dude does not want to miss another down of football ever again. He doesn't care who's in front of him. He doesn't care where he was drafted. He wants to be back on a field making plays and making an impact. That's where my belief in him is coming from. I already believed in the talent. I talked about it nonstop for 4 months. You all know that. You everydayers, you folks that jumped in during the draft, you know how much I talked about this dude. But now is when I'm starting to see and I'm starting to hear what kind of person he is, what kind of mindset he has. This kid is going to outwork anyone to be where he wants to be. Something else that Baldy talked about that I want to touch on before we get out of here for the weekend was his take on the Bucs as a whole. He talked about all the weapons. He talked about Baker, talked about how this was one of the few teams in the league that has their entire starting offensive line back together for this season, how important that is when it comes to the continuity and building something together, not to mention that they had their offensive line coach back. He talked about Grizz and how energetic he is, how well he and Baker feed off of one another, talked about the leaders on the team, Mike, Levante, Tristan, Vita. He covered a lot of this stuff. But the biggest thing he said was this: you cannot talk about who is coming out of the NFC, whether it's the Eagles, the Lions, the Rams, Commanders, Niners. You cannot have an honest conversation about what team is going to emerge out of the NFC and not include the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They are going to be a tough out for a lot of teams this season, and they just keep getting better. They keep adding incredible young talent, and they are going to be not just a really fun team to watch, but a really, really difficult team to get past. That's what this is about. The Bucs have needed to build things back up, brick by brick, since that final Brady season when things really fell apart. There were a lot of different circumstances, but things fell apart. It doesn't matter that it's the 4th straight season that this team has a new offensive coordinator. It doesn't matter that they get overlooked and ignored. All that matters is that Todd Bowles and Jason Light have done what they can to make this team better each and every year. Last year's draft class was outstanding. This year's, hopefully, is even better. You hope that Reddick returns to his Philly form, but this is a team that believes in themselves. They believe in each other, and they know that on their best day, there is not a freaking team in the NFL that they cannot beat. There are weapons all over the offense. There are playmakers all over the defense. It's all got to come together. We know the offense is already there, and now they get to integrate Emeka Egbuka and Tez Johnson. But the defense, they were out here. They got to bring it together. Antoine's got to be healthy. The secondary's got to be healthy. Hassan Reddick has to return to form. Logan Hall needs to be an impact guy for more than just a week before he disappears for a month, and then he's an impact guy again. Servassier Dennis, he got Todd Bowles' attention. That's for sure. He's got to maintain that high level of play, that high level of intensity as we get into mandatory minicamp, as we get into training camp next month, as we get into the preseason and then the regular season. But let me tell you, if the defense can gel the way that the offense has over the course of the last 2 years, this is a 13, 14-win team. This is a tough offense to stop. And if their defense reflects their offense, it's going to be a nightmare to try to score against. That's going to do it for this episode. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. We're on TikTok. Hit me up over there at Locked On Bucs. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube with the notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. And become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. If you want to support the show, but you don't want to become an insider, you should become an insider. But if you don't want to, just leave a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. It does help other Buccaneers fans find the show. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.